Hit the music, hit the lights. Oh, what a sight. As you step out to the stage, get the crowd in a rage. Ring the bell and let's fight. 365 nights, it's time to make a change. Let the beast from its cage. Unleash hell, cause we're going to war. Hit the ground running or take flight and soar. Never put fun. Let's settle the score. And the crowd roars for more till some blood hits the floor and makes an impact. Cause we're bringing it back. Act like it's your last chance. Now's the time to react, to make an impact. Put them under attack, top speed and full contact. Don't leave nothing intact, we make an impact. Cause we're bringing it back, act like it's your last chance. Now's the time to react, to make an impact. Put them under attack, top speed and full contact. Don't leave nothing intact.
Welcome to the best thing since sliced bread. Welcome to PTV. I am your host with the most hot like butter toast, the P to the Y to the R to the O. It's your boy Pyro. And we are back in the virtual arena to look at this last week on Wrasslin. So, this is how it's going to go. We kick things off and we start our week with AEW Dynamite, because if WWE can start their week with SmackDown, we can sure as hell start ours with Dynamite. And then we go through each show, from Dynamite to Impact to SmackDown to Raw to NXT. We look at what happened each show, and then we decide how we, the wrestling fans, did against the show in question. Did we come out winners and pick up the 1, 2, 3, or did the show get a sneaky win on us? Sounds simple, right? Let's break it down and let's get straight into this week's AEW Dynamite right now. AEW Dynamite this week opened the only way it could with a video package from the Young Bucks explaining their actions from the end of last week, and they promised to show the world the new Young Bucks later tonight, and I cannot wait. And I won't have to. Mike Tyson's going to be the enforcer in a match later, and he was going to say some stuff, but he got interrupted by MJF, who tried to convince Tyson to side with the Pinnacle later, and he even offered him a blank check, which Tyson just ripped up, ate it, and spat back in MJF's face. The announced team then ran us down the rest of the card before we rolled into our first match of the night, and it's the AEW Tag Team title match between Death Triangle's Pac and Rey Fénix, taking on the champs, the Young Bucks. The Young Bucks' new gear looks different, but it's still very them, and it is delightfully obnoxious. Matt and Pac started things off and went head to head, and then each tagged in Nick and Fénix respectfully, and the pace picked up immediately. The match soon went to Dive City, because of course it did with these four guys. SCU watched intently as the match rolled on, and Nick really spiked Fénix with his outside-in X-Factor. A little later we saw the best friends paying attention to this top-notch match as well, as Pac was taken into Matt Jackson and kicked him like a bad habit. But the Young Bucks brought things back and showed off their mean streak by hitting tandem apron bombs on both their challengers. Rey Fénix then told Physics to go fuck itself as he hit a mental sequence of moves off of the ropes, followed with a double cutter and capped off with a double team barrage with Pac, but all of this only got them a 2 count. Then Pac was going for a deadlift German suplex on Matt Jackson, but Matt was holding onto the ropes. So Rey Fénix, I shit you not, then ran across the ropes, kicked Matt in the face so that Pac could complete the move, and still, it only got a 2. Then Nick and Rey got entangled in this monkey flip into a rebounding destroyer the words alone don't do justice to. In fact, trying to explain it with just mouth words is kind of like trying to explain a rainbow to a blind man. Even seeing it, you just have to question, how? Nick and Fénix were then caught up in a sick game of top this. They both hit poison ranas on the other's tag partners. Nick super kicked Rey as he tried to leap the barricade, but then Fénix bounced back with a cutter and everybody down. Pac hit the Black Arrow on Matt, but Nick split up the pin and dragged Matt back to their corner so he could tag himself in. Nick then caught a flying Fénix with a super kick, ripped his mask off, and then he and Matt both super kicked him right in the face. Nick pinned him for the 1, the 2, the 3 to retain their AEW tag titles. This was an incredible match. Don Callis was happy, and even if Jurassic Express weren't impressed. But still, your AEW Tag Team Champions, the new Young Bucks, and that is just too sweet. Hangman Page was hanging out with Dark Order next, Alex asked him his thoughts on the situation with the Elite. Page kind of just deflected and went to get spring rolls. Alvarez must have been on the run because he was then immediately interviewing Chris Jericho with the Inner Circle and Mike Tyson. Jericho asked Tyson not to show any favouritism in their match later, and Tyson said he'd call things firm but fair and right down the middle. We were then back to action with Red Velvet versus Jake Cargill, and Jade is just impressive. Red Velvet went at her right away, but Cargill kicked her in the cranium and shut that shiz right down. This was a match of pure power versus passion. Red Velvet got in some sweet shots, but Jade Cargill just yeet her into the front row. Red Velvet went for a moonsault, and Jade managed to miss most of it, and then hit her finisher Jaded on Red and pinned her clean in the middle of the ring to pick up the pin and the win. Tony Schiavone had words with Britt Baker next to discuss the women's rankings. Britt said that she's going to become the #1 contender and ultimately the women's champion, and put the entire women's locker room on notice. Next we had the in-ring debut of Anthony Ogogo in a squash match against some nameless jabroni. Ogogo hit a gut punch and won by ref stoppage in less time than it took me to write this note. We then got a video package from Miro, who put the locker room on notice and had somehow lost Kip. And then we rolled into Chris Jericho versus Dak Harwood with Iron Mike Tyson as the special guest enforcer. These two had a throwback Smash Mouth classic, as you might expect from the two. Jericho went for a chair early, but Tyson confiscated it. Dax went for Jericho's bat, but again Mike Tyson took that away. Jericho and Dax then played homage to Rock and Austin in '99 with a classic camera spot. And Dax squared up to Tyson before the break, but then thought better of it. When we came back from the ads, both men were just chopping the crap out of each other. Harwood hit a big rebound powerbomb off of the ropes and only found a 2 count. Y2J locked in the wall to Jericho, but Cash Wheeler split it up, only to get admonished by Tyson and knocked out by an angry Sammy Guevara. Jericho hit the code breaker for 2, and then the Pinnacle and the Inner Circle flooded out and all-out chaos erupted. Wheeler went to use the baseball bat but got KO'd by the baddest man on the planet. Jericho then hit the Judas effect, and it was 1, 2, 3, victory, Y2J, and the Inner Circle and Mike Tyson stood tall. Jericho cut a quick promo as the Pinnacle scarpered away, declaring Mike Tyson an honorary member of the Inner Circle. We then cut to the parking lot, and Don Callis put over the new Elite. Kenny Omega spoke his truth, Matt Jackson put the entire tag division on notice, and Callis told the world to be prepared for more surprises before he then super kicked the crap out of the cameraman. Gold. Thunder Rosa was back with a video package saying that she was back and after all of the women's gold in the NWA and in AEW. We then got back to action with Chris Statlander officially returning to the ring for the first time in 10 months in a match against Amber Nova. Statlander was back and booping everyone inside. She soon hit a packaged tombstone that she calls the Supernova, and she pinned Amber Nova to pick up the win before she and the best friends could give the people what they want and celebrated with a nice big hug. Team Taz was still waiting on an answer from Christian Cage on joining them. Speaking of Christian Cage, he was out next with an open challenge. Christian talked about his contract and his open challenge, but got interrupted by Taz, who demanded an answer from Captain Charisma right there and then. Cage said no, which pissed Taz off, and apparently Will Hobbs accepted Christian's challenge. Or not? There was no ref, but that didn't stop Hobbs abusing Christian all over the arena and stepping on his face. I guess we'll have that match at a different time officially. Perhaps next week? We then got a look at a video package from the upcoming women's title match between Tai Conti and Hikaru Shida. The announce team ran down some of the upcoming matches from next week, but then it was time for our main event, a Falls Count Anywhere match for the TNT Championship between Matt Hardy and Darby Allin. Big Money Matt grabbed a chair right off the get-go and used it on Darby as he was coming backwards off the ropes with a variation of the coffin drop. The Faces of the Revolution were shown watching on. Darby got a hold of a chair and he was getting some payback on Matt, but then the HFO came out with weapons. Dark Order and Sting then poured out to even the numbers. Sting took out Private Party and all chaos had broken out as we went to the break. As we came back from the ads, Matt sent Darby flying over steps, over the barricade and into the crowd. Ethan Page and Scorpion Sky were gonna jump Sting, but Lance Archer came out and cut them off and they just left. Archer then dropped Private Party and took them out of things. Sting tossed Darby Allin his bat and left things being just Matt and Darby. The crafty vet got in a low blow before the champ could use the bat though. Matt then hit Darby with a chair wrap twist of fate for a 2 count on the stage. Things then spilled down the tunnel and backstage, where Matt found a ladder and a table. Wait, tables, ladders, chairs? I see what you did there. Matt set Darby up on the table and came off the ladder with a big Hardy leg drop through the table, but still only got a 2 count on the champ. Matt bowled Allen back into the arena, and Matt looked to powerbomb Darby off the stage, but the champ wriggled free and kicked Matt Hardy right in the ding-ding. Darby then went right after Sting's bat, and Darby smacked Matt with a bat a good few times, and then used it to clear the announce table. He later popped Matt right on top of the table, and with a back shot for good measure, Darby then climbed the scaffolding, hit a coffin drop on a pro Matt Hardy below, and amidst all the wreckage, he picked up the pin and the 1, 2, 3 to retain his TV title, and what a match. And this was also perhaps the first time that anyone had destroyed the English-speaking announce table in AEW in their first 2 years. But how did we, the wrestling fans, do against AEW Dynamite this week? An easy one. We win hands down 1, 2, 3. In fact, I'd go as far as to say it was almost as much of a squash as Anthony Ogogo's debut match. But how do things look on TNA Impact on Thursday? Well, let's find out right now. And so we roll into Impact Week 2. Impact opened with an X Division match between TJP and Josh Alexander. These two put on a great technical match, with each man countering and reversing each other's techniques beautifully. Josh showed off his strength by carrying TJP up to the top rope on his shoulders, but TJP would show off his agility by finding a way to transition that into a superplex and a float over, but then before TJP could complete his hold, Alexander would transition that into an ankle lock. At the top of the match, Josh Alexander capped off a mad sequence by hitting Divine Intervention, and he pinned TJP to pick up the pin and the win in what was a stellar opening match. The announce team ran down the card and the upcoming events, and we then got into a video package from the soon-to-be returning Taylor Wilde. We then had ourselves a match between Decay's Crazy Steve and the Good Brothers Carl Anderson. The Machine Gun. Crazy Steve caught Carl in a crossface, but got distracted by Big LG and had to let him go. A bit of back and forth posturing later, Steve stumbled into a spinebuster and the Good Brother got the dub. Steinermath was then back at Swingers Casino out of nowhere as Little Petey Pump popped up to crunch the numbers and discuss each of the competitors' odds in their match at Rebellion. Eddie Edwards and Willie Mack were out next, talking about the incidents at Hardcore Justice, including the fact that Tommy Dreamer got beaten up, and they called out BBD. And out came EY and his crazy crew. EY said he had nothing to do with the beating up of Tommy Dreamer, and as BBD surrounded the ring, it looked like they had the numbers game until Sabin and Storm hit the ring and evened out the odds. The Cowboy then challenged BBD to an 8-man tag match at Rebellion. Susan and Deanna Purrazzo were then chatting backstage when Scott D'Amore found them and ordered them not to ruin Jazz's retirement, which was coming up later. But first, Tenille and Caleb held their first interview segment, and it was backwards and awkward as heck. The whole thing was just a long-winded way of Tenille saying that she was going to win the Women's Championship at Rebellion, and then she walked off, leaving her interviewer dazed and confused. Jazz was out next for her retirement ceremony. She gave an impassioned speech before Fire and Flavor interrupted proceedings. That wasn't taken well though, as Scott D'Amore sent out a referee to officiate perhaps one last match for the legend. This didn't run long though, and the vet sent the disrespectful scamps running after a Falcon Arrow and a 1, 2, 3. Jazz then went back to her retirement speech as if nothing happened, and the locker room head out in full to send her off and wish her well. D'Amore gave Fire and Flavor a good telling off and told them that they were putting their tag titles on the line at Rebellion, but Jazz kept her word and said she was done, but she had a suitable partner in mind for Jordan at Rebellion. We had a Pick Your Poison match next between Brian Myers and Matt Cardona. Well, kinda. Matt picked Myers' opponent, which was Jake Something. Myers just put Jake Something away with a roster cutter and then announced that his pick for Cardona was the Death Machine Sami Callihan. Sami jumped Matt before the bell, beat him up on the outside of it, but once things were in the ring and the bell rang, Cardona exploded out of the gate with a radio silence for a close 2 count. Matt went for radio silence a second time, but Sami ducked and Matt just flew right out of the ring. Cardona went for radio silence a third time, but Sami reversed it into a pop-up powerbomb, and Cardona almost ate a pile driver, but he was able to backdrop out of it. He went back to the well again and went for radio silence a 4th time, but this time Sammy did get his package pile driver, and the draw put the major player away, and then went on to call out Trey Miguel. Sammy demanded that Trey join him, and Trey declined. Sammy said then that he was the one to put Dreamer out of action so that Trey could take his place in the main event at Hardcore Justice. Trey then kicked off at Sammy, but Sammy put Trey down with a kick to the dick and a chair shot to the head. Sammy then suplexed Trey onto the chair and just laid him laying in the ring. But as Sammy got to the top of the ramp, Trey was getting himself back up, and Sammy looked oddly impressed. Finjuice had a video message from Japan for the Good Brothers ahead of their Tag Team Championship match at Rebellion, but then we closed Impact out with a press conference for the title versus title main event at Rebellion between TNA Impact World Champion Rich Swann and AEW World Champion Kenny Omega. Well, one of the two to begin with, as Kenny Omega and Don Callis were fashionably late, because of course they were. Everyone answered some questions, and Kenny cut a fire promo about being the best in the world and how Rich Swann wasn't ready for the spot he was about to take on. Omega capped off with a slap, and we went off the air as the press conference erupted into an all-out ruckus. So with that in mind, how did we the fans do against this week's Impact? There was some solid storytelling this week, but things did feel a little stop and start. Good, but not great. So I'd say that Impact kicks out a 2 and ekes out a sneaky win here. Certainly wasn't as strong as Dynamite, and that's something that they're going to have to keep in mind should the two stay intertwined. But how did things work out on Friday Night SmackDown? Let's take a look at WWE's Friday Night show right now. So into the SmackDown after WrestleMania we go. We got a new announce team with Michael Cole and Pat McAfee. Great. Anywho, moving swiftly on, SmackDown opened with the Roman Empire, and the Big Dog cut a solid promo about his win at WrestleMania and basically said that no one's going to want to step up to him now after that. And since he's shown up and opened his show, who's now just going to go home? But then Cesaro came out, and the champ was so unimpressed that he just walked off, ignoring Cesaro, and seemingly left. Sonya and Adam Pearce were then talking backstage when Cesaro found them and said that he would step up to Roman and wants a match tonight. Sonya said she'd check with the head of the table and get right back to him. The fat fuck Otis was out next with Chad Gable for a match against Rey Mysterio. Cole and McAfee discussed the tale of the tape, and then the legendary Luchador head out with his son Dominic. The bell rang and Otis ran right through Rey. Rey came back with a seated senton and tried to pick up the pace, but as Rey was later coming off the ropes with a springboard crossbody, he was caught by Fatty Boom Boom and planted with a power slam. Otis then went for the flying bulldozer, but there was no one home as Rey just rolled out of the way. Rey then got a 619 and a crucifix driver, and he put the fat boy away with a pin for the win. We then went to the back so that Paul Heyman could answer Cesaro's challenge on behalf of the head of the table. Heyman put Roman over and said that it wasn't raining Saturday, it was the tears of angels, as they knew how bad the beating would be that Roman would put on Daniel Bryan and Edge. As to Cesaro's challenge, Paul said that he could have a match tonight, in the main event, but against Jey Uso. Sami Zayn was out next and Ash wasn't happy. Sami cut a promo about what happened at WrestleMania and how it was supposed to be his night. Actually blamed Logan Paul and Min Owens and everyone else for his shortcomings and called out KO. KO happily obliged and head to the ring for a WrestleMania rematch right after the break. But as the bell rang, Sami ran and rolled out of the ring. He then rolled back in as KO rolled out and went to roll away a third time when KO got back in the ring again, but KO changed direction. KO had had enough of Sami's shiz and went after the conspiracy theorist with fists on the outside. Sami hit himself a sunset flip powerbomb before the break, but only got himself a 2 count. As we came back from the break, Zayn ate a super kick, but only got KO 2. Owens would then hit a swanton bomb, but again only got a 2. KO went for a pop-up powerbomb, but again Sami Zayn rolled out of the ring and tried to get away, but KO rolled right out after him. Seriously, there was so much rolling in this match that you'd think it was sponsored by Limp Bizkit. KO threw Sami back in the ring and went for the pop-up powerbomb again, but Sami managed to hop himself over the top and escape. Sami then rolled away again. KO got him back in the ring and went for the stunner, but Sammy pushed Owens off him and rolled out again, but this time he stayed there and got himself counted out. Owens wasn't letting Zayn off that easily though and went after him. He threw the Ginger Whip back in the ring and hit him with a stunner, and then we rolled into our next segment. We went backstage and your new Intercontinental Champion Apollo Crews had things to say. He was accompanied by Baba Tunde, aka Baba Kato, now known as Commander Aziz. Apollo said that he would give Big E a rematch, but he's not here because of Commander Aziz and his Nigerian nail. Apollo then warned the rest of the roster that if they tried to come after his IC title, that they would face the same fate. The Street Profits were out next to celebrate Bianca Belair's WrestleMania victory and on becoming the new SmackDown Women's Champion. The Profits first cut a quick promo because they had a tag title match coming up immediately after this, but first it was time to welcome and congratulate the fresh Princess Belair. The new SmackDown Women's Champion made her way out to the ring and talked about how blessed she felt after winning the title at WrestleMania in the main event at Night 1. As the ring was being cleared ahead of the tag title match, Sasha Banks cut a promo backstage. Kinda. She showed off her welt from the brutal hair whip and then just walked away. What a walking away on this week's SmackDown. We then got a quick promo from Bayley, who popped up to say that she wanted to challenge Bianca Belair for the title. We then finally rolled into the tag title match between the Street Profits, who were of course already in the ring, and the champs, the Dirty Dogs, came out, and Michael Cole actually got their name right for once. The two teams put on a competitive match, and the Profits were on fire for the first half. After the break, Ziggler had Dawkins distracted, and after the big man dispatched a Dolph with a big right hand, Angelo walked right into the spinebuster for Rude, and Dawkins kicked out at 2. Ford then picked up the pace and hit a sick dive into both the Dirty Dogs, and as he was flying over, Dawkins managed to nab the tag. A few shenanigans and a blind tag later, Ziggler was able to hit the zigzag on Ford and pin him to retain the SmackDown Tag Team titles. Cesaro cut a promo saying that he was ready for Roman and that he's going to prove it tonight by beating Jey Uso in the main event. We cut quickly to Roman's reaction and the head of the table did not look impressed. We then had a random one-on-one match between Natalya and Shayna Baszler. These two technicians exchanged counters for a moment, but as Natty went for the sharpshooter early on, Baszler wriggled away with a little assistance from Nia Jax. Tamina wasn't impressed by this though, and she soon squared up to the Supersized Samoan and the Submission Magician. Jax tried to interfere again, but to her partner's detriment, as the savvy vet Natty rolled Baszler up for a sneaky pin and the win. Nia wasn't happy about that though and went after Natalya, but then Tamina super kicked her and perhaps accidentally right in the face. Natty didn't seem too bothered though, as she picked up a non-title win over one half of the tag team champions and the vets stood victorious. We then, after looking at the UFO for the 1000th time, got to our main event after Jay cut a quick promo saying he was gonna get Cesaro. Jay hit the ring and reminded everyone that he won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royale. Jay went after Cesaro's arm in the early goings, trying to take away the Swiss Superman's power. Uso also got a sick super kick on the Flying Cyborg as he came off the apron at him. Later on, Uso went up to presumably look for a splash, but instead ate a dropkick from Cesaro on the floor all the way to the top rope. After some back and forth, Cesaro hit his swing but only got 5 rotations before he got jumped by a surprise Seth Rollins, which of course caused the DQ. SmackDown went off the air with a seething Seth screaming at Cesaro, who got lucky at WrestleMania, and that Seth would be the be-all and end-all of the WWE. With that in mind, how did we the wrestling fans do against the SmackDown after WrestleMania? It was better than Raw for sure, and there was way too much rolling and walking away, and again it just didn't feel like a SmackDown after Mania. It's not a squash, but it isn't a win for us, I'm afraid. No, this is a kick out at 2 for SmackDown as Vinnie Mac's Friday Night Shaka Slam gets the win over us for the true. But how would Monday Night Raw fare? Well, let's find out right now. Raw this week opened with Big Daddy Drew McIntyre. It's a classic last week on Raw opener. Drew was talking about getting retribution on Mason Teabag and how MVP was the mastermind behind everything. And then, just like clockwork, out came MVP. MVP said that he had nothing to do with it, but Drew wasn't buying it. But Mason T-Bar then jumped Drew and double chokeslammed him again before storming out right past MVP. They then cut a short but batshit crazy interview in the back about porcupines and saber-toothed tigers. What the fuck is this? Drew tracked down Adam Pearce backstage and demanded a match against them. Adam said he'd have to find a partner though, and Drew wasn't wanting any of it. We then rolled into our first actual action of the night as Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin were set to take on the Viking Raiders in a rematch from last week. The Hurt Business isolated Eric in the early going. He managed to tag in Ivar, but the former Hurt Business boys still stayed in control. The Raiders turned things around and Ivar squashed Shelton against the barricade. One Viking Express later for Cedric Alexander, and the Viking Raiders had themselves another victory. Randy Orton cut a promo backstage saying the Fiend was now done and in his rear view and that he was going after the WWE title. But then that twat Riddle rolled in and said that they should form a tag team called RK Bro. Here's my answer for that, and Randall's. RK no. Randy eye-rolled and walked away, straight to Adam Pearce's office to demand a match with whatever his name is later in the night. We were going to see Charlotte Flair versus Asuka later in the evening, but first the Queen had words for the WWE Universe. Charlotte was still sour, her WrestleMania match was taken away from her. Asuka then had out, but before she could so much as say a word, so did your Raw Women's Champion Rhea Ripley. Charlotte said that Rhea should sit in on the commentary and take notes in their match later, and Ripley agreed. Asuka tried to get in a word in edgeways, but Charlotte kept shutting her down until the Empress got in a loud last word saying she'd beat Charlotte's ass in the main event, and you know she was serious because she said bitch. It was Randall versus Riddle next. Scooty Doob was out first and let birds fly out of his feet because reasons, and then an annoyed Apex Predator arrived. Riddle was determined to have Uncle Randall give him a piggyback ride, but the Viper weren't having none. Riddle went for the PK off the apron, but Randy snatched his ankle and brought the bro down. The two swapped chops, and as Riddle began to get the upper hand, Randall whipped him sternum first into the opposite corner. Randall then channeled his dad and superplexed the Stoner Bro and soon got his vintage DDT. But as the Viper went to strike with the RKO, Riddle somehow reversed it into a crucifix and got a sneaky pin on the 14-time world champion. The match was very giving of Randy in a solid attempt to try and get Riddle over, but the little twerp still bugs the living crap out of me. Sheamus was backstage with Adam Pearce next. Pearce congratulated Sheamus on winning the US title at WrestleMania, and Adam asked what type of champion the Celtic Warrior was going to be and suggested he hold an open challenge a la John Cena. Sheamus said he would, just not for the title. Shania were out next for tag team action against Naomi and Lana. Naomi and Lana tried to chop Nia down with swift kicks, but the supersized Samoans suplexed them both and tagged in Shayna. Queen of Spades looked to destroy Lana's arm, but then Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke came out mid-match to taunt Nia by playing replays of Nia's bumbles from the Raw after Mania. Nia was all mailed and left the match to go after the Blondes. That allowed Naomi and Lana to hit a double X-Factor on the abandoned Shayna and pick up a pin and a non-title win over half of the women's tag champs. We then took a look back at Bad Bunny's match from WrestleMania, and the Latin megastar had some words to say after their win. Next it was time for Miz TV. Miz and Maurice were out together but without Jomo this week to celebrate the new season of Miz and Mrs. Miz and Maurice were blowing smoke up each other's asses, and Priest came out and challenged Miz to a match later in the evening. The New Day bumped into Riddle backstage, and Kofi had himself a match against Elias next. Elias was going to deliver a musical performance, but got interrupted by a bass solo from Xavier Woods. Elias exploded out of the gates with a vicious knee to Kofi. Woods would distract Elias with more bass-based shenanigans, and played Stone Cold's theme in front of the musical megastar. Elias would overcome all the bullshit though, and ultimately win the match after a big old elbow off the top. Alexa Bliss was in her playground next, and she said that she'd had Lily since forever. She talked about how when she was younger, she broke a little girl's arm and stole her ice cream because Lily made her do it. I just twigged, Lily's teeth are little skulls. I wouldn't want to be the one that those two come after. Mandy and Dana got interviewed next and were basically asked what the hell they were thinking teasing Nia. Jax stormed in and the blondes scarpered. Shayna slid in and said that they were only losing earlier because of Nia, and she better sort her shit out, or else. And then, Randomly, Angel Garza popped up out of nowhere to ask Nia what the hell she sees in Reginald. Big Daddy Drew was out next for his handicap match against Mason T-Bar. The Two Towers came out with crappy new graphics but the same old Retribution music. The number one contender took it to the Poundland Bane Bros, and MVP was shown backstage watching intently. T-Bar was coming off the top, but Drew just nutted him. The Scottish Warrior was then looking for the Claymore, but got mauled by both the tall boys. This brought out Braun Strowman, and after the break, we now had us a tag team match. Braun and Mace went at it, but Braun ended up with a boo-boo on his forehead. The Masked Menaces then got Braun cut off, and in hindsight, he wasn't really much help in this situation at all. I mean, I guess he was a damaged sponge so Drew could have a rest for a bit, because once Drew came in off the hot tag, he took down both of the big boys. He ripped Mace's mask off and said he's doing him a favour. He then pimp-slapped him with his own mask and got himself disqualified. Braun then ripped off T-Bar's mask and sent the two packing, but with a victory via DQ. We then got a clear look at the two, and I like this move, but not the fact that not even Corey seemed to know who they were. Hopefully they'll ditch the shit names next week and that this Retribution mess will be over once and for all. It was The Miz versus Priest next, and the Archer of Infamy was looking to find some momentum after losing last week. Maurice and Miz were having a kiss, but Priest pulled Miz back in the ring with a broken arrow. I must say I've missed Maurice. She's one of the better managers of the last decade, and here she helped her man any way she can. The Miz dished out some it kicks, but just pissed off Priest. Priest hit Miz with a springboard cannonball, and Miz and Maurice tried the same trick as last week, but Damien powered out at 2. Hit the lights out, 1, 2, 3, Archer of Infamy picks up the win. Your new United States Champion Sheamus was out next. He said he was going to be a fighting champ and that he would hold an open challenge for the US title when he feels like it. Humberto Carrillo answered the call and Sheamus stomped the crap out of him and just slung him out of the ring. The Celtic Warrior then just brutalised Humberto on the outside to send a message to the rest of the locker room. One bro kick later and the segment was done. It was nice to see Humberto on Raw for the first time in ages, even if it was just a cup of coffee and a kick in the chops. Our main event was up next, and Asuka took on Charlotte Flair whilst Rhea Ripley watched on from ringside. Asuka was looking for a hip attack, but the Queen had other plans. The two brawled on the apron for a bit, and Asuka hit a neck breaker that took both women down, and Rhea Ripley watched on as we went to the break. After the break, the two dished out some big kicks, and Charlotte hit her spear but only got a 2 count. The Queen caught Asuka in a knee bar in the ropes, which looked dope, and Charlotte had the figure of 8 on later facing Ripley, but Rhea ripped the Queen out of the master hold. Somehow though, the ref didn't see any of this, and this allowed Asuka to get the pin for the win, and the Queen flipped her shit, and the Lioness murdered her as ever. And I gotta say, I agree. Rhea's interference was blatant and should have been a DQ in the Queen's favour. One more swift kick to a recovering ref, and Raw went off the air. But how did we, the wrestling fans, do against this Monday night's Raw? Well, it was certainly stronger than last week and set up some sweet storylines that I'm intrigued to see how they play out in the next few weeks. So with that in mind, I'll say that we, the wrestling fans, come away with a sneaky win, almost as sneaky as Asuka's win over the Queen, and we eke out a 1, 2, 3, but only just, damn it. Well, with that in mind, let's roll off our week and roll into NXT on a Tuesday right now. And so, into NXT Week 3 we go, and right off the bat we've got a shiny new intro for NXT on a Tuesday. And I'm hoping that this is marking the true start of a new era for the Black and Gold brand, because last week was just bland. Kyle O'Reilly was out first to open the show, and Cool Kyle was talking about his goals and where things were going to go now that him and Adam Cole's business was over. Cameron Grimes then had out and offered to invest in O'Reilly and help him go to the moon. Kyle entertained Grimes for a moment as he told us that he's medically cleared and looking for his first opponent, and then Cool Kyle clocked Cameron, confirming that it would be the two of them squaring off later. We then took a look at the Warrior of the Sun, Saraya, arriving at the CWC. She was greeted by William Regal, and then Zoe Stark popped up to respectfully offer to be her opponent in her debut tonight. Saraya agreed, and it was set. LA Knight then cut a quick promo before heading straight out for his match against Dexter Lumis. The two locked up and the match was away. Loomis held a psychological advantage and psyched Nike out into backing up nuts first into the turnbuckle, which I don't think I've ever seen before. After the break, Loomis hit a big spine buster and then got in a cool combination of offense, capped off with a rebound suplex, but Nike kicked out at 2. Loomis and Knight were scrapping on the outside until Loomis got distracted by Indy Hartwell. LA Knight would take full advantage of the googly-eyed pair and put Loomis down on his way back into the ring and pinned him for the win. After the match, Indy looked to link lips with Loomis, but the way arrived took her away. Leon Ruff cut a promo backstage expressing his rage towards Swerve Scott. Io Shirai was being interviewed next by Beth Phoenix as they were talking about their match at TakeOver being the end of Io's 300-plus day title reign and her getting a rematch once she takes some time off to rest and recuperate. Frankie Monet crashed the proceedings to say that she was a huge fan of both women and she'd fill Io's shoes while she was away. The former champion didn't take too kindly to this and hissed that she was always more of a cat person before walking away, leaving Wera Loca to it. Breezango versus GYV was next. Breezango were pouncing about dressed as Queen's Guard, which, although Wade Barrett appreciated it over on commentary, Drake and Gibson saw it as an insult and Breezango taking the piss. GYV divided and conquered in this match, cutting the ring in half beautifully. They put Prince Pretty away with a ticket to Mayhem, and Gibson would pin him to pick up the win. Indy Hartwell was about to cut a promo, but the Wade got in the way and cut her off. Bronson arrived to say that he had his eyes on Johnny's North American title, but Austin Theory stepped in to say to get to Johnny, Bronson had to first beat him. It was time for the debut of the Warrior of the Sun, Saray, next. I don't really know anything about this new superstar, but Beth Phoenix seemed excited to call the match, so I was intrigued to see how this would play out. I liked what I saw from Saray's style. It seemed to be like a mix of fun with impressive athleticism and a bit of the strong style sprinkled on top. After an impressive low-angle dropkick and a picture-perfect fisherman suplex complete with a bridge, Saray got a close 2-fall. Saray got dropped by a big kick from Zoe Stark, only to get a 2-2. A swift kick to the face and a modified Saito suplex later, though Saray picked up the pin and the win in her debut. Stark's respect continued to show through, though, as she raised the newcomer's hand after the match. But then Toni Storm jumped Stark on her way out of the arena. Raquel Gonzalez was being interviewed backstage alongside Dakota Kai. There was a little tension, but essentially the champ said it was time for the locker room to step up and line up. Candice was lecturing Indy about her crush on Loomis as they were on their way to challenge for the women's tag titles, but Candice didn't notice that Indy ditched her. The Poison Pixie ran her mouth at the women's champs, and they whipped her butt for it. We then took a look at the new NXT Cruiserweight Champion Kushida ahead of his open challenge next. Kushida kept things short and sweet on the mic as he opened the challenge, and soon enough, only Lorcan came out to accept. Kushida showed off his technical skills early on and tied Lorcan up in multiple ways. Lorcan got in some explosive offense, taking it to the champ with an impactful European uppercut. Kushida bounced back with a shote, shades of his mentor Jushin Thunder Liger. Lorcan then connected with a big blockbuster but only got a 2 count. But when Kushida hooked in his hoverboard lock, it was only a matter of time before Lorcan would tap and Kushida would retain via submission. But there was no time to celebrate as Legado del Fantasma jumped Kushida. MSK rushed out to even the odds, and the champ would send Escobar packing with a kickflip. Mercedes Martinez called out Big Mama Gonzalez for not answering her challenge. She said she was going to take out Dakota Kai and then nothing would stand in the way of the two of them. The way were then backstage as Candice crawled back. Before she could tell Johnny and Austin what was up, Indy burst in and said that she had spoken to Mr. Regal and got the way a tag title shot, which everyone seemed pleased about. Well, almost everyone. It was tag team action next between Everrise and Imperium. Fabian exploded out of the gate with a big old clothesline and got right down to taking things to both members of Everrise. Big Dane then stormed out to have words with his former Sanity running mate Alexander at ringside, and Everrise almost took advantage with a sneaky roll-up, but it only got them 2. Then Drake blindsided Wolf on the outside, but got thrown down by Carrion and carried out. Imperium then hit their European bomb to pick up the pin and the win. The main event was next, and Carl bumped into Cross on his way to Gorilla. Mr. Axe and Smash made his way out first. We then took a break and a quick look at next week's card, and out came the Rich Redneck. O'Reilly's grapple game was on point, and he had Grimes tied up in knots until Grimes backflipped out of the hold and hit a deadlift German suplex as we rolled into the break. After soaking up some savage kicks, Grimes planted Kyle with a big side slam. Kyle was looking for a rebound clothesline but got himself caught in a collision course. Kyle then hit a big brain buster and his top rope knee drop and picked up the pin and the win for the 1, 2, 3. And Mr. Axe and Smash stood tall as NXT went off the air. But how did we, the wrestling fans, do against this week's edition of NXT on Tuesday? Leagues better than last week's Chatfest. I'll gladly say that we came out winners here with the 1, 2, 3. But that's it for this week's edition of Last Week on Wrestling. I've been your host Pyro, and you can find me right here on Pyro Biggs on YouTube, at Ryan Pyro Biggs on Facebook and Twitter. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Up that fam and smash that bell. But for right now, Pie's out. So peace out, lights out.